hearing and tasting and touching and smelling and especially seeing, vision, that he was able to take in information. And, this is something that even current day educators seem to forget. The last time we used all our senses in most learning situations is kindergarten. We have a lot of fun with colors and noise and music and all kinds of sensory experiences in kindergarten. And then after that, it turns into black and white text in books, and you pretty much have to make do with that, with obviously exceptions now that we know about how the brain learns and handles information. But in his day, that was how things went. And he put his sensations, his senses to use, especially in combining them in what's called synesthesia. Synesthesia is the combining of the senses. So this was a third pillar of Leonardo da Vinci's approach to learning and observing and creating. So curiosità, dimostrazione, sensazione, and then let's move on to sfumato. Sfumato, and if you think about that word, sfumato, it has the word fumes in it, which means smoky or hazy. And this is where Leonardo had the capability to deal with uncertainty, with paradox, with complexity, and then being able to take complexity and break it down into its simple parts. He also was tuned into using and paying attention to his intuition, which is part of that whole sfumato and hazy. And when something just comes to you as an inkling or as a kind of interesting angle on something, he would follow it. He would write about it in his notebooks. He would experiment and take things to the edge in terms of what might be possible for a learner in his day and age. So that's sfumato. So we move on then to arte scienza, which is arts and sciences. So, as I mentioned earlier, based on his upbringing and the kind of apprenticeships he was sort of thrust into as a kid, preteen even, and then through his teenage years, he developed this whole sensibility that embraced both the logic and articulation and precision of science, along with the aesthetics of the arts. He was very much into beauty, and he saw beauty as an antidote to stress. He was into aesthetics. He himself, and we're going to talk more about this in a minute, was apparently a very handsome physique, had a handsome physique, was considered very handsome, and he was also a very engaging conversationalist, and so he was often invited as a dinner guest. And so, he was a very pleasant, pleasing, handsome person to have around, but in the deeper sense of that, he took up painting. He understood about colors and about counterpoint that was aesthetically appealing. He knew about balancing the heart and the brain, so to speak, even in the days when people used to think the brain was in your rear end. He knew they were separate and appealed to different parts of one's psyche. And so, yes, as a painter, he definitely played out the role of beauty. He also had this incredible ability to display perspective. Now, if you think about his artwork called The Last Supper, which was a fresco done on the wall of a monastery, it's up on the wall at a height above eyesight. And if you recall the imagery, Jesus, the historic figure, is holding his arms out, and the disciples are along the table at the so-called Last Supper. And apparently, Leonardo was so good at perspective that he painted the arms and the outstretched arms and the hands of Jesus so that when the monks would come into the dining hall in which this fresco was displayed, it looked like he was literally like plucking them and welcoming them in through the door because of how he used perspective. And so they felt welcomed into the room. Now, from close-up, you might say Jesus' body looked out of proportion. But in fact, from the angle at which these monks were experiencing it in that environment, he had perfect sense of perspective. Pretty cool, pretty amazing. Okay, now another of the lessons or skills that and principles that Leonardo would use, according to Michael Gelb, is corporalità. Corporalità. Now, if you get the word corp in there, which means body, it has to do with physicality. So, as I mentioned already, Leonardo was actually a very handsome physical specimen, apparently, and very strong, and the stories were abounding that he could bend horseshoes with his bare hands. Now, whether that was true or not, who knows? Maybe. But he was a strong guy and well-balanced himself in his physique, but he also took really good care of his body. Health was very important to him, as I mentioned before. He said you need to be responsible for your own health, not only physically. In fact, he was a vegetarian, which I didn't know before, but then also understood about the impact of your mood and your attitude on your physical well-being. So corporalità is where he would express physicality through himself and his own body, but also we know he appreciated the bodies of others around him. And I'm sure he built that into a lot of his inventions as well. And then finally, the seventh of the principles that Gelb has laid out as key to Leonardo's approach to thinking and learning and expressing his genius was connessione, which is connection. Now, there's a famous quote by Leonardo that said that everything connects with everything else. And this is all about systems thinking, but also the interconnection of one thing to another. So if you have a teenager, for example, or a staff member who is lacking in interest in any topic or engagement in their schoolwork or their work projects or so on, the trick is, the key is to find something that connects the two. So when I was working a lot with young people, particularly in England, and they were struggling with mathematics, we would use the example of playing pool or billiards and talk about the angles of shooting the ball. Well, they understood that. They could get it. They knew they had to turn the cue a certain direction to hit the ball at a certain place to make sure it went into the pocket. And then we could turn that back around and talk about vectors and angles and so on, the impact and consequences and so on of as relates to mathematics. So, and that's not my area of expertise. So I found that interesting. So that's a good way. Just find ways to connect that connect to something else, and that then will engender interest and engagement in any topic. So just to repeat, the principles that how to think like Leonardo da Vinci, according to Michael Gelb by the book of the same name. Curiosità, curiosity. Dimostrazione, demonstration or hands-on. Sensazione, which is using all your senses, especially vision. Sfumato, dealing with paradox, uncertainty, complexity, and using your intuition. Artecienza, including both aesthetics and beauty along with logic in your work in a balanced way with your heart and your mind or your brain. Corporalità, keep good care and 100% responsibility for your health and physical strength and balance, indicated by Vitruvian Man. And then connessione, all about systems and how things connect, and reminding us that everything connects with everything else. So just to finish off with Leonardo, there's a quote that he said, "Fix Fix your course to a star and navigate any storm. And he related this especially to feeling like your life had a higher purpose. And we don't often hear about that in regards to Leonardo. So this is really an invitation to liberate your own creative power, to unleash your own creative resilience, and then gift it all to yourself and to the world around you. So thanks, Leonardo, and thank you to you, our listeners, for being here with us. Do check out the archival shows on SOBradionetwork.com. Also check into GameChangerThinking.com and see what's going on over there in my world. And thank you so much for being here today. We hope you'll join with us next week. And remember, the life you live is the legacy you leave. Bye-bye.